feel like the NBA is overlooking something. Each year, there are conversations around the top players in the league, and one name never comes up. Well, at least not at the beginning of the season. It's almost like the league and fans all forget about this player. And I'm trying to figure out what that is. Okay, first off, I just need to pause the intro so I can stop this madness. The player I'm talking about is Jimmy Butler. Yes, affectionately known as Jimmy freaking Butler, aka Jimmy Buckets, BKA, Playoff Jimmy, yada yada. But this video is just distracting. I've been listening to Fall Out Boy since high school, and they are a solid band, and this is a solid song in comparison to their other songs, so kudos. But Jimmy freaking Butler, what? This purple would make Prince puke Purple Rain. Those hip thrusts are not only offensive on several continents, I'm pretty sure if I were monetized, I would be demonetized after showing this nonsense. This video is so cringy that the hair was the least of my worries while watching this. I only made it to 1 minute and 52 seconds. I just couldn't physically take it anymore. I felt myself blacking out from the purple hip thrusty whack belt buckle cringe. Anyway, video aside, Jimmy Butler's a top 10 player, and I can prove it. I'm Mr. B, and you've entered the 3. Let's talk about it. Welcome back, and to the newcomers, welcome to my channel. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more great content. Thank you. Chapter 1. How important is scoring really? When it comes to judging players in today's NBA, I almost feel alone in not falling for the scoring trap. I'm not saying everyone is a part of the sheeple movement, but I know that all of you know someone who, when you listen to them talk about basketball, you can't believe how naive they are. By the way, if you don't know anyone like this, chances are it's you. But all is not lost because now you're here. Join us and bask in the glorious pain that is truth. In truth, when talking about Jimmy Butler being a top 10 player, I feel like only recently his name has been brought up, and it's only relegated to the playoffs. True enough, he has been ultra impressive and aggressive over the last few playoff seasons, carrying the Miami Heat to 3 conference finals and 2 finals appearances in the last 4 years. In fact, during this run, they only had 2 7-game series out of those 12 playoff series, and lost a total of 4 out of 12 playoff series in the last 4 years. Now, if I cared about Butler's scoring prowess and wanted to make the argument that he's top 10 because of his offensive production, I could go a little stat crazy about his playoff numbers. For perspective, I could compare him to the NBA's top MVP vote getters from the last 4 seasons: Embiid, Jokic, Giannis, and Tatum. In the last 4 playoffs, Butler has scored 25 plus 29 times, 30 plus 17 times, 35 plus 12 times, 40 plus 8 times, 45 plus 3 times, and his highest scoring game was 56. But how does he hold up against the other guys I mentioned? Now, you'll see that Jimmy leads the 35 plus, 40 plus, and 45 plus, he's tied with Tatum, categories, and has the highest scoring game at 56. Another way of putting it, the man is beating out the last 4 MVPs, 2 of which won NBA championships, 1 of which holds 2 scoring titles for the last 2 years. So the guy is a playoff giant as of late, and with last year being the year he scored 56 in a game, I'd say the best might still be yet to come. However, I'm not one to just harp on scoring, because during these same 4 seasons, Butler during the regular season has averaged a measly 21.4 points per game. So if we held scoring as a major statistic, I think we could all agree, while he's good enough to be a team's #1 option, that alone won't win him a top 10 spot. Chapter 2. There's no method to the madness. Part of why basketball is so much fun is because half the arguments in our circles stem from stats, while the other stems from opinion or the eye test. And I think that's part of the fun, right? Being able to make a case for your guy or gal in whatever sport they compete in. However, the problem lies not in the different models or algorithms people use to determine who the best players are, but that they will adjust these models or algorithms to fit their eye test. For context, You can watch Stephen A or any big name show debate slightly different criteria for MVP each year. This is not a knock on them, but just an observation. That said, it can devolve into some serious arguments and contradictions on those popular shows and in our personal circles when we follow their lead in this chaotic mess. I think the biggest problem they have is an honest admission to where the player falls in their eye test. That said, I don't think their methods are altogether nonsense. Take a look at last season's MVP votes. You can see Butler is actually number 10 on the list, which is what made me decide to do this video. So, according to our trusted MVP voters, this list shows the last season's top 13 guys. For the most part, I cannot complain too much with this list. I know people are looking and might feel like LeBron, Dame, KD, Paul George, Trae Young, and others are snubbed, but the statistical arguments for those guys would be the weakest. But I admit you could make them. Like LeBron averaged 28, 8, and 6, but only played 55 games. Dame averaged 32, 4, and 7, but only played 58 games. KD averaged 29, 6, and 5, but only played 47 games. Trae Young I know there's a lot of talk about the NBA's 65 game rule, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today, but I will say availability is important when talking about the best players. Last season, Butler played 64 games, which is just one game shy of the requirement. While he would not qualify with this new rule, I want to express how difficult it is for players over 30 years old to actually qualify, which is funny because the biggest complaints are coming from the younger players. So here's a list of all the players in the NBA who are 30 years old and up, played at least 60 games for 30 minutes plus. There are 17 total who accomplished this task. Now, what if we cut the players off who average less than 15 points per game? Down to 9 players. What about less than 20 points per game? 4 players. These are the oldest players who were not only available, but also significantly contributed to their team's success in 2023. Butler is the only one that took his team to the conference finals and the NBA finals to boot. What's crazy is that the 3 teams I watch the most consistently are the Heat, Pelicans, and Golden State. Sorry, DeRozan, but I can't sit through the Bulls. The Bulls. You get what I meant. My point is that Jimmy freaking Butler is 33 years old and still performing at an incredible level. I know people marvel at LeBron, who is 38 and the best 38-year-old we have ever seen. Stop the debates already. But the man played 55 games last season. I'm not saying Butler would average 29 points per game if he played 9 less games, but let's admit that fewer games work when players are veterans and understand where to pick the spots. This is why I think Butler shines in the playoffs, because during the playoffs we get to see how good he can be over a short span of games. For proof of this, look at LeBron and Butler's stats from the first round of the playoffs to the end of the conference finals. Butler played 17 games, James played 16 before he was eliminated. So this is the best indicator for how they perform in short periods. Just look at how similar the stats become. Butler scores more and more efficient from 3, with more steals and slightly fewer turnovers. He also won more games, finishing 12-5 versus LeBron's 8-8. I'm not hating on LeBron, but he's aging, and my point is that for 2 players who are supposed to be on the downward slope of their careers, it's funny how their names stay in the top 10 player conversations. And my argument is that Butler needs to be brought up more if we want to be realistic. Chapter 3. But what about the young players? I know. After that last section, many people are already saying to themselves, Butler can't compete with the younger players in the league. This might be partially true. Anthony Edwards, Tatum, Luka, Morant, are absolute monsters for the next generation of players, and their numbers show it. But none of these guys have rings, and Tatum happens to be at the mercy of Butler, having been stopped twice in the conference finals by what everyone said was an inferior team. And both times, Butler's the one who put them away. My point is not that these guys will never beat Butler, but just pointing to the fact that Butler has been good enough to beat the guys that are considered to be ahead of him. In last year's playoffs, Butler had to beat Giannis, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown in order to face off against Jokic and Murray. So if we check our handy dandy MVP voting results, he had to go up against 4 MVP contestants. That's one for every round, and their number 2s like Brown and Murray, who are all-stars. In comparison, the Nuggets played against 0 MVP contestants. Not saying it was easy, but for the 10th MVP contestant to end up where the second contestant ended up, should be the cherry on top for Jimmy's top 10 positioning. If not, Jimmy was 5th in total steals, no one from the MVP list ahead of him. 12th in assist to turnover ratio, no one from the MVP list ahead of him. 9th in steal to turnover ratios, no one from the MVP list ahead of him. 8th in free throws made, 10th in efficiency. I know there are a zillion stats to make a case, but the case I think Butler shows is one for consistency and efficiency, and a clear MVP candidate because his team value is immense. And unless I'm unclear on what words mean, I don't think MVP candidates can be considered a candidate if they're not being considered the top players in the league. Jimmy finished 10th last year and then crushed the playoffs. And if you've been watching, he's doing more of the same this year. Well, that's it. The case has been made, and I imagine some will still disagree, and that's fine with me. That's the beauty of basketball after all. However, I'd like to see your top 10 player list in the comments below. Maybe I'll drop mine if we get enough debate in the comment section. And if you made it this far, hit the like button and subscribe. If not, I still appreciate the view. Well, that's it for me. Mr. B, signing out. Peace.